Story disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction and is intended for entertainment purposes only. The content includes dark themes, horror elements, and fictional depictions of rituals and sacrifices that are purely imaginative and not reflective of any real-life practices or beliefs. Viewer discretion is advised. This video is not suitable for younger audiences, and parental guidance is recommended. The story does not endorse or promote any harmful behavior, violence, or dangerous activities. Please note that all characters, events, and settings are entirely fictional and created for the purpose of storytelling. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events, is purely coincidental. In the bustling city of Ngamba, a curious boy named Tunde stumbles upon an ancient secret buried beneath the city. When he unlocks a door that should have remained sealed, he unleashes the terrifying watchers, ancient beings of shadow determined to consume the city and plunge it into darkness. As the skies begin to vanish and Ngamba falls into chaos, Tunde must embark on a perilous journey, racing against time to stop the watchers before his world is lost forever. This epic African folktale blends ancient myths, dark forces, and a young hero's courage. Watch as Tunde confronts mystical creatures, shadowy cults, and powerful ancient artifacts to save his city from doom. Discover the untold secrets of Ngamba in the disappearing sky, a tale of light, darkness, and the power of courage. In the vibrant, sprawling city of Ngamba, where the streets bustled with life and the air was filled with the scent of roasted maize and spices, an ancient secret was about to unfold. Deep beneath the city's surface, where modern buildings stood tall, something stirred, something that had been asleep for centuries. Tunde, a 13-year-old boy with a wild curiosity and an even wilder imagination, stumbled upon something he shouldn't have. While playing with his friends in the forgotten alleyways of the city, Tunde discovered a small, hidden tunnel carved into the stone. There was no sign, no warning, just an eerie feeling that made the hairs on his neck stand up. His friends dared him to go inside. Tunde, always the bravest of the group, accepted the challenge. He grabbed a torch from his backpack and made his way into the darkness, the tunnel narrowing as he moved deeper underground. His heart raced, but something pulled him forward, a strange, unexplainable force. At the end of the tunnel, Tunde found it, a massive stone door etched with symbols that glowed faintly in the darkness. The air around him felt thick, like something ancient was breathing in the very walls. Without thinking, Tunde placed his hand on the door, and to his shock, it swung open with a low groan, revealing a room filled with glittering artifacts, animal carvings, and most importantly, a book. An ancient book that looked like it hadn't been touched in 1,000 years. His fingers trembled as he picked up the book. The cover was cold to the touch, and as soon as he opened it, a rush of wind swept through the tunnel, as though something had been released. The room shook, the symbols on the walls glowing brighter. Tunde's heart pounded in his chest. He slammed the book shut, but it was too late. The ground beneath him cracked. From the darkness, a low, growling whisper echoed through the air, "You have awakened the watchers." Tunde stumbled back, dropping the book, but the voice followed. Shadows moved, swirling around him, as though the air itself had come alive. From the cracks in the earth, creatures made of mist and shadow began to crawl, their eyes glowing a deep red. "You've released us," the voice continued. "And now, the city will fall." Tunde sprinted out of the tunnel, his heart racing, his breath ragged. His friends stood waiting outside, laughing and teasing him until they saw the terror in his eyes. Without a word, he grabbed their hands and pulled them away from the alleyway. Something terrible had been set in motion. Ngamba's skies darkened as Tunde ran through the streets, gripping the ancient book tightly. His mind raced with questions. What had he awakened? Who were the watchers, and what did they want? That night, while the city slept, Tunde couldn't shake the feeling that he had brought something terrible upon his home. He sat in his room, flipping through the book's pages. Each one was filled with strange symbols and words written in a language he couldn't understand. But there were drawings, ancient drawings, that showed the Watchers, beings from another realm, locked away long ago to prevent them from spreading darkness across the land. As the night grew deeper, Tunde felt a presence in his room. He looked up and gasped. A figure stood in the corner, its eyes glowing just like the creatures he had seen earlier. Its form was tall and cloaked in shadows, but its face was like nothing Tunde had ever seen, neither human nor animal, but a twisted combination of both. "Tunde," the figure whispered. "You've opened the door to our world. And now, you must close it. Or your city will drown in darkness." Tunde's blood ran cold. "Who are you?" he stammered. "I am one of the keepers, bound to protect the realms from chaos," the figure replied. "But now, the Watchers are free, and they will not stop until Ngamba is theirs." Tunde felt a lump in his throat. He had unleashed something ancient, something unstoppable. And now, he had to find a way to put it back. The next morning, Ngamba was no longer the vibrant city it had been. The skies remained dark, the air heavy with an unnatural stillness. People whispered about the strange storm that had appeared overnight, and the glowing rain that fell, rain that vanished before it hit the ground. Tunde knew it was only the beginning. The Watchers were coming, and they wouldn't stop until the city was theirs. But he wasn't the only one who knew. Somewhere in the heart of the city, a cult, long forgotten, just like the book, was waiting for this moment. They had prepared for years, knowing the time would come when the Watchers would return. Tunde needed help. He couldn't fight this alone. As he ran through the city, he heard whispers in the alleys, rumors about the Cult of Shadows, a secret group that believed in the Watchers, that worshipped them, and had been waiting for their return. They knew the ancient stories, the rituals, the sacrifices. And now, they wanted power. Desperate for answers, Tunde sought out his grandfather, a wise elder who knew the city's oldest secrets. His grandfather's eyes widened when Tunde explained what had happened. "The Watchers," his grandfather muttered, pacing back and forth. "They were sealed away for a reason, Tunde. You've opened the door, but you must never let them gain full power." Tunde frowned. "But how do I stop them?" His grandfather sighed. "The book you found is not just a book, it's a key. The Cult of Shadows will be looking for it. They want to finish what you've started. You must keep it safe, or the entire city will be consumed." Just as his grandfather spoke, a loud knock came at the door. Both of them froze. The cult had found them. Tunde's heart raced as he grabbed the book and hid it under his shirt. The door creaked open, and there they were, men in dark robes, their faces hidden in shadows. Their leader stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Give us the book, boy," the leader demanded. "Or your city will burn." The air in the room thickened as the cult leader's eyes bore into Tunde, but there was something off about the way his shadow moved. It writhed and stretched unnaturally, almost as if it had a life of its own. Tunde's heart raced, but he stood his ground, clutching the ancient book beneath his shirt. The cult leader stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. "You don't understand the power you hold, boy. The Watchers will bring darkness, but we will control it. Give us the book." Before Tunde could respond, the room grew cold. His grandfather's face twisted in fear as he stepped back, pointing at the floor. "Tunde, look." Tunde's eyes followed his grandfather's trembling hand to the floor where the cult leader's shadow had split. From its depths, something slithered out, an eerie, shapeless mist, like a creature born from the darkness itself. It moved silently, its eyes glowing a faint green, and began to wrap itself around Tunde's feet. Panic surged through him as he felt the cold grip of the shadow tightening around his legs. Suddenly, his grandfather moved swiftly, pulling out an ancient charm from his pocket and slamming it onto the floor. The shadow creature recoiled with a hiss, retreating into the leader's cloak. The cult leader smirked, unfazed. "This is only the beginning," the leader sneered. "You will soon see the true power of the Watchers. We will return." With that, the robed figures vanished, leaving only the faint scent of burnt air and a lingering sense of dread. Tan's hands trembled as he grasped the book. "What was that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His grandfather placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "The Watchers are not just spirits, Tan. They bend reality, and their power is not limited to the physical world. They control shadows, emotions, fears. If the cult gains control of them, they will turn Ngamba into a city of nightmares." Tan's heart pounded in his chest. He had awoken something far darker than he ever imagined. Days passed, and the city of Ngamba began to change. It started slowly, at first, small, eerie signs that only a few people noticed. The shadows around the city grew longer, twisting into strange shapes as the sun set, and the air felt heavier, like a storm was always on the horizon. Then, one morning, the sky itself began to disappear. Tan woke up to screams outside his window. People were gathering in the streets, pointing up at the sky in shock. What they saw was terrifying. Patches of the sky were simply gone, leaving empty voids where the sun should have been. It was as if something had torn holes in the fabric of reality, and beyond those holes was nothing, just endless blackness. The city was in chaos. People were crying, praying, and running in all directions, convinced that the world was ending. But Tan knew the truth. This was the work of the Watchers. "They are getting stronger," his grandfather said, looking out at the disappearing sky with a grim expression. "The more time they spend in our world, the more they unravel it." Tan felt a chill run down his spine. It wasn't just the sky that was disappearing, time itself felt distorted. People in the streets would blink, and suddenly hours would pass, or shadows would shift unnaturally fast, as though the sun was racing across the sky. "I have to stop this," Tan said, gripping the ancient book tighter. "But how? How do I put them back?" His grandfather sighed deeply, his face lined with worry. "The book holds the answers, but it's written in a language of the old world. You will need help deciphering it." Tan's heart sank. Where could he possibly find someone who understood the language of a forgotten world? Suddenly, a voice whispered in his mind. It was soft, but unmistakable, the same voice from the night he opened the door. "You cannot fight the Watchers alone." Tan's nights grew restless as the strange voice returned, haunting his dreams. The voice spoke in cryptic warnings, but each time he awoke, he felt a heavy weight pressing down on his chest, like something was watching him, something waiting for him to make a move. One night, Tan lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, when he heard a soft scraping sound. He froze, listening closely. The sound grew louder, closer. He turned his head, and his blood ran cold. A large eye was staring at him from the wall. It wasn't human, nor was it an animal's. It was massive, glowing with an unsettling blue light, and it blinked slowly, as though studying him. Tan scrambled out of bed, his heart pounding in terror, but the eye remained, watching his every move. He ran to his grandfather's room, breathless. "Grandpa, there's something in my room." His grandfather grabbed his staff and rushed to Tan's room. The moment they stepped inside, the eye was gone, leaving only a faint, pulsing glow on the wall. "It's a sign," his grandfather whispered. "The Watchers have taken notice of you." Tan swallowed hard. "What do they want?" His grandfather shook his head. "They don't want, they take. The Watchers feed on fear, on chaos. The more you resist, the more they hunger." Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. Outside, the sound of shattering glass filled the air as buildings cracked, and the earth beneath the city began to split. People screamed as the streets buckled under their feet. The Watchers were making their move. Tunde gripped the book tighter. The cult was out there, and the Watchers were growing more powerful by the minute. If he didn't act soon, the city of Ngamba would be lost to darkness forever. Tunde and his grandfather stood at the window, watching as the streets of Ngamba were swallowed by chaos. Cracks ran through the roads like veins, the sky continued to disappear in patches, and the people fled in every direction, their faces twisted in terror. It was clear the Watchers were no longer hiding in the shadows. They were taking control. "We can't let them win," Tunde said, tightening his grip on the ancient book. His grandfather nodded, though his face was etched with fear. "There is still a way, but it will be dangerous. We need to find the Eye of Dogo." Tunde frowned. "What is that?" The Eye of Dogo is an ancient artifact hidden deep in the forest beyond the city. It has the power to reveal the true form of the Watchers, to bring them out of their shadows and into the light where they are vulnerable. But if the Watchers are vulnerable in the light, why hasn't anyone used it before? Tunde asked, his heart racing with a mixture of hope and fear. His grandfather's face darkened. "Because it comes with a price. The eye does not reveal its power to just anyone. Those who seek it must be prepared to give something in return." Tunde felt a chill run down his spine. He didn't want to ask what the price would be, but they had no choice. If they didn't stop the Watchers, Ngamba would be lost. As they prepared to leave, the house suddenly shook violently. The walls cracked, and the floor beneath their feet began to tremble. From the ceiling, a dark, shadowy figure began to form, its limbs long and twisted, its face hidden in darkness. Tunde, his grandfather shouted, pulling him away as the figure reached out with its shadowy hand. But it was too late. The figure moved with terrifying speed, wrapping its cold, smoky fingers around Tunde's wrist. His body froze, an icy chill flooding through his veins, and the room around him began to blur. He could feel the Watcher's presence inside his mind, twisting his thoughts, feeding off his fear. In a desperate move, his grandfather threw the ancient charm at the shadow figure. The charm glowed bright as it hit the figure, causing it to shriek and retreat into the cracks in the wall. Tunde gasped, the coldness releasing its grip on him. "We need to go," his grandfather said urgently. "They will come for us again, and next time, we might not be so lucky." With no time to waste, Tunde and his grandfather fled into the night, the ancient book tucked under his arm and the weight of the Watchers growing ever closer behind them. The air grew thick and damp as Tunde and his grandfather entered the forest. The trees loomed tall, their branches twisted like gnarled fingers reaching for the sky. The deeper they went, the darker it became, the light from the disappearing sky barely piercing through the thick canopy. "This place gives me the chills," Tunde muttered, glancing around nervously. It felt as though the trees themselves were watching them. His grandfather remained silent, his eyes fixed straight ahead. "We are almost there." Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the trees. Tunde froze. What was that? Before his grandfather could answer, a figure appeared in the path ahead. It was a woman, draped in tattered robes, her skin pale as moonlight, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Her lips curved into a cruel smile as she stepped toward them. "I've been expecting you," she said, her voice like the wind through dead leaves. Tunde felt his blood run cold. "Who are you?" The woman laughed, a sound that sent shivers down his spine. "I am the guardian of the Eye of Dogo. No one passes this way without my blessing." Tunde glanced at his grandfather, who had gone pale. "This is the price I spoke of," his grandfather whispered. "We must face the Guardian's trial if we want to claim the eye." The Guardian's eyes gleamed with malice as she raised her hand, and the trees around them began to move. Their branches twisted and bent, forming a cage of thorns around Tunde and his grandfather. The air grew colder, and the ground beneath their feet began to shift, turning into a dark, swirling mist. "You must choose," the Guardian hissed. One of you will face the trial. The other will stay behind forever. Tan's heart pounded in his chest. He could feel the weight of the ancient book pressing against him, reminding him of the responsibility he carried. But before he could speak, his grandfather stepped forward. "I will take the trial," his grandfather said firmly, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. Tan's heart ached as he watched his grandfather walk toward the guardian. The trial had begun. Tan watched helplessly as his grandfather disappeared into the swirling mist. The guardian stood silent, her glowing eyes fixed on him, as if she were waiting for something. Tan's pulse raced. He could feel the weight of the ancient book in his hands, its pages heavy with secrets and power. His mind raced, wondering what kind of trial his grandfather would face. The guardian's voice cut through his thoughts like a knife. "The trial is not for the faint-hearted," she said, her voice soft but deadly. "He will face the shadows of his past, his deepest fears. If he fails, he will remain trapped in the darkness forever." Tan clenched his fists, his heart pounding with fear for his grandfather. He wanted to rush into the mist and help, but the guardian raised a hand, stopping him. "You cannot interfere," she said coldly. "This is his trial. And if he fails, you will never see him again." Tan swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. He had no choice but to wait. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. Tan strained his ears, listening for any sign of his grandfather, but there was nothing, only the cold wind and the rustle of the trees. Then, suddenly, the mist began to clear. Tan's heart leapt in his chest as he saw a figure emerging from the fog. It was his grandfather, but something was wrong. His face was pale, his eyes wide with terror, and his hands were shaking. I saw them," his grandfather whispered, his voice trembling. "The watchers, they were there, waiting for me." Tan rushed to his grandfather's side, supporting him as he stumbled forward. "What happened? What did they do?" His grandfather shook his head, his eyes filled with fear. "They showed me the end. If we fail, Ngamba will fall into darkness. The watchers will consume everything." Tan's blood ran cold. He knew now more than ever that they had to succeed, no matter the cost. As the mist fully cleared, the guardian stepped forward, holding out a small, glowing stone, the Eye of Dogo. It shimmered with an eerie light, pulsating with power. "Take it," the guardian said, her voice soft but commanding. "But remember, the eye reveals all, light and dark. It will show you the Watcher's true form, but it will also show you the truth of yourself." Tan hesitated, his hand hovering over the stone. The weight of the journey ahead pressed down on him, but he knew there was no turning back now. With a deep breath, he grasped the Eye of Dogo, and the world around him began to shift. The moment Tan grasped the Eye of Dogo, a wave of dizziness hit him. The ground disappeared beneath his feet, and the forest twisted and warped around him, transforming into a swirling vortex of light and shadow. The world as he knew it collapsed into nothingness, leaving him suspended in a space between realities. In the darkness, the eye burned with a blinding light, and through it, Tan saw flashes of the future. Ngamba was no longer a city of life, it was a wasteland, choked with ash and shadows. The Watchers walked openly among the ruins, their twisted forms casting long, ominous shadows over the broken streets. People cried out in fear, but there was no escape. The Watchers consumed everything in their path, their cold eyes void of mercy. Tan's heart pounded in his chest. This wasn't just a possibility, it was a warning. If they failed, this was what awaited Ngamba. A voice echoed in his mind, soft and distant, but unmistakable. It was his grandfather. "Tan, you must stay strong. The Watchers are not invincible. The eye holds their weakness." The vision faded as quickly as it had come, and Tan found himself back in the forest. His body trembled, and his breath came in ragged gasps. The Eye of Dogo pulsed in his hand, a small but powerful reminder of what was at stake. "Are you all right?" his grandfather asked, his face lined with concern. Tunde nodded, though his heart still raced. "I saw it. The end. If we don't stop them, Ngamba will be destroyed." His grandfather's expression darkened. "Then we have no time to waste. We must find the Watcher's lair and confront them before it's too late." With the Eye of Dogo in their possession, Tunde and his grandfather set off, their steps quickened by the weight of the future that hung over them. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they were now the only hope for Ngamba. The streets of Ngamba were eerily quiet as Tunde and his grandfather made their way through the city. Buildings stood tall, but the vibrant life that once filled the streets was gone. People hid indoors, their curtains drawn, whispering in fear of the unseen presence lurking in the shadows. They knew where they had to go: the forbidden market, a place where only the desperate ventured. It was said to be a place where dark deals were made, where those who walked in the light feared to tread. If anyone knew how to defeat the Watchers, it would be someone from the market. As they approached, the air grew colder, and a heavy mist settled over the narrow alleyways. The market itself was hidden beneath the city, accessible only through a crumbling staircase that descended into darkness. Tunde hesitated at the entrance, his pulse quickening. "Are you sure about this, grandfather?" His grandfather's eyes were hard. "We have no other choice. The Watcher's influence runs deep here. If we want to stop them, we need to understand them." They descended into the darkness, the sound of their footsteps echoing against the damp walls. The market was unlike anything Tunde had ever seen. It was a twisted maze of narrow paths, lit by flickering torches and filled with strange and eerie figures selling items of power and mystery. Whispers followed them as they passed, and Tunde felt eyes watching from every shadow. They approached a small stall at the far end of the market, where an old woman sat hunched over, her face hidden beneath a hood. Her stall was cluttered with oddities, bones, charms, and objects that pulsed with an unnatural energy. "You seek the truth about the Watchers," the woman rasped, her voice sending chills down Tunde's spine. "But the truth comes at a price." Tunde stepped forward, his hand clutching the Eye of Dogo. "We need to know how to stop them." The old woman's eyes flickered toward the glowing stone in Tunde's hand. "Oh, the Eye of Dogo. You possess great power, boy, but power alone will not save you." "What do we need?" Tunde asked, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. The woman leaned forward, her eyes glinting with a strange light. "The Watchers are bound to this world by ancient rites. To break their hold, you must sever their connection to the source. The answer lies within the forgotten temple, deep in the heart of the jungle. But be warned, the temple is guarded by forces older and darker than the Watchers themselves." Tunde's grandfather stepped forward. "And what will this cost us?" The old woman's smile was thin and cold. "Nothing, for now. But remember, every choice has consequences. You may find what you seek, but it will come with a price." With that, the old woman turned away, leaving them with more questions than answers. The path ahead had grown even more dangerous, but Tunde knew they couldn't turn back now. The next morning, Tunde and his grandfather set off toward the jungle, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that their journey was far from over. The air was thick with humidity as they trekked through the dense trees, their footsteps muffled by the undergrowth. The deeper they ventured, the more oppressive the atmosphere became, as if the jungle itself was watching them. "This place feels alive," Tunde whispered, glancing at the twisted vines that hung from the trees like snakes. His grandfather nodded, his face grim. "It's said that the jungle protects the temple. Those who enter without purpose are never seen again." Tunde's heart pounded in his chest. The weight of the Eye of Dogo in his hand was a constant reminder of the task before them. They had to reach the temple, but they had no idea what awaited them within. As they pushed forward, the jungle seemed to close in around them, the trees growing thicker, the air heavier. Strange sounds echoed through the underbrush, low growls, rustling leaves, and the distant cry of unseen creatures. Suddenly, the ground beneath Tan's feet gave way, and he tumbled down a steep embankment, landing hard on the forest floor below. His grandfather's shout echoed above him, but Tan couldn't move, his body was frozen in place. From the shadows, a figure emerged. It was tall and thin, its body wrapped in dark, tattered robes. Its face was hidden beneath a hood, but Tan could feel its gaze piercing into him. "You carry the Eye of Dogo," the figure hissed, its voice like the wind through the trees. "But do you know what it truly means?" Tan struggled to move, his heart pounding in his chest. "Who are you?" The figure stepped closer, its presence overwhelming. "I am a servant of the old ways, the guardian of the temple. You seek to destroy the Watchers, but the path you walk is not as simple as you believe." Tan's breath came in shallow gasps. "What do you mean?" The figure's eyes glinted from beneath its hood. "The Watchers are not your only enemy. The temple holds secrets that even they fear. If you enter, you will be changed. The price of power is never without sacrifice." Before Tan could respond, the figure vanished into the shadows, leaving him alone in the jungle. His grandfather scrambled down the embankment, pulling Tan to his feet. "Are you all right?" Tan nodded, though his mind was racing. The temple was more dangerous than they had imagined, and the warnings of the figure still echoed in his mind. But they had come too far to turn back now. Tan and his grandfather continued through the jungle, but the air felt thicker now, charged with unseen forces. Every step they took seemed to echo deeper into the earth, as if they were waking something ancient, something that had been waiting in silence. A sudden crackling noise shattered the stillness. Tan stopped, his pulse quickening. His grandfather held up his hand, signaling him to stay silent. In the distance, the low growl of a beast reverberated through the trees, sending a chill down Tan's spine. "Stay close," his grandfather whispered, eyes scanning the trees. "We are being watched." Before Tan could respond, a massive creature leaped out from the shadows. Its body was covered in dark, iridescent scales that shimmered with a malevolent glow. The creature had the face of a lion but the body of a serpent, with eyes that gleamed like cold fire. Tan's heart raced. The creature's presence was overwhelming, it radiated power and fury. It crouched low, ready to pounce, its eyes locked onto Tan, as if seeing something in him that no one else could. "It's the guardian," his grandfather said in a trembling voice. "It's testing you." Without warning, the creature lunged. Tan barely had time to react as it swept past him with lightning speed. He stumbled backward, the world spinning as he landed hard against a tree. Pain shot through his body, but he forced himself to stand. The creature's glowing eyes bore into him, unblinking. It circled him, its movements slow and deliberate, as if studying him. Tan clutched the Eye of Dogo tightly in his hand, the stone warm and pulsating with energy. Suddenly, the creature stopped. Its eyes flicked to the eye, then back to Tan. For a split second, it hesitated. And then, without a sound, it bowed its massive head and retreated into the shadows. Tan's breath came in gasps, his mind spinning. What just happened? His grandfather approached cautiously, his face pale. "The guardian, it accepted you. It recognizes your power now. But that was only the beginning. The jungle will test you in ways you can't imagine." Tan swallowed hard, the weight of the eye in his hand feeling heavier than ever. Whatever lay ahead, he was no longer just an ordinary boy. The jungle had chosen him, but for what purpose, he still didn't know. Night had fallen by the time they reached the outer edge of the forgotten temple. It loomed in the distance, its towering stone walls covered in thick vines and moss. The air was thick with tension, and the jungle around them had fallen into an unnatural silence. Tunde felt a shiver run down his spine. Every step closer to the temple felt wrong, as if they were walking into a trap. His grandfather had gone quiet, his eyes focused on the path ahead, but Tunde could see the worry etched into his face. Suddenly, a rustling sound came from above. Tunde looked up, his heart skipping a beat. Dark shapes moved through the trees, silent, watching. Their eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight, but they made no sound. "Grandfather, oh, what is that?" His grandfather looked up, his face pale. "The Watcher's servants. They know we are here." The figures in the trees began to move, slithering down the trunks like shadows. Tunde's pulse quickened. There were dozens of them, their movements smooth and silent, their glowing eyes fixed on him. Before Tunde could react, one of the figures leaped from the trees and landed in front of him. It was tall and thin, its skin pale and stretched tight over its bones. Its face was hidden beneath a dark hood, but its eyes, those glowing, empty eyes, were fixed on the Eye of Dogo in Tunde's hand. The creature reached out with long, skeletal fingers, but before it could touch him, the blinding light erupted from the eye. The creature shrieked and recoiled, its hand smoking as if burned. Tunde stumbled backward, his heart pounding in his chest. The light from the eye pulsed again, brighter this time, and the creatures hissed in unison, retreating into the trees. His grandfather grabbed his arm. "Run!" They sprinted toward the temple, the creatures' shrieks echoing behind them. The jungle seemed to come alive with movement, branches whipping at them as they ran, the ground shifting beneath their feet. Tunde's lungs burned, but he didn't dare slow down. As they reached the entrance of the temple, the air grew still again. The creatures had stopped chasing them, but Tunde could feel their eyes watching from the shadows. "We are safe for now," his grandfather panted, leaning against the stone wall. "But inside is where the true danger begins." Tunde's heart pounded in his chest, the light from the eye still pulsing faintly in his hand. The temple loomed before them, dark and foreboding, its entrance like a gaping mouth waiting to swallow them whole. The temple's entrance was nothing more than a crack in the stone, barely wide enough for them to slip through. The air inside was cold and damp, and the walls were covered in ancient carvings that glowed faintly in the darkness. Tunde couldn't shake the feeling that the eyes from the jungle were still watching them, even here. As they ventured deeper into the temple, the silence became oppressive, broken only by the sound of their footsteps echoing against the stone. The passages twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the heart of the ancient structure. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the darkness, a voice that wasn't his grandfather's. It was soft and melodic, but there was something unsettling about it, something that made Tunde's skin crawl. "You should not have come here, little one." Tunde froze, his breath catching in his throat. The voice seemed to come from all around them, but there was no one else in the passage. Who are you?" Tunde whispered, his voice trembling. The voice laughed, a sound that sent chills down Tunde's spine. "I am the one who guards the secrets of this place. You seek to stop the Watchers, but you do not understand the price you must pay." Tunde's grip tightened on the Eye of Dogo. "We will stop them. Whatever it takes." The voice grew darker, its tone mocking. "Brave words for one so young. But the temple will not let you live unchanged. The Watchers are the least of your concerns now." A cold breeze swept through the passage, extinguishing their torch. Tunde's heart raced as they were plunged into darkness. He felt his grandfather's hand on his shoulder, but the presence of the voice lingered in the air, unseen but undeniable. "You will find what you seek, but at a cost." The temple seemed to shift around them, the walls closing in, the air growing heavier. Tunde could feel the weight of the eye in his hand, its glow barely illuminating the path ahead. Whatever lay deeper in the temple, it wasn't just the Watcher's secret, it was something far older, far darker. They had come too far to turn back now. The air inside the temple grew colder as Tund and his grandfather ventured further. The soft glow of the Eye of Dogo cast eerie shadows on the stone walls. Carvings of strange creatures twisted in impossible shapes lined the hallway, their eyes seemingly alive with intent. Tund could feel something pulling him deeper into the temple, a force that tugged at his mind. It wasn't just the eye that was guiding them now, something within the temple itself seemed to recognize him, like an ancient will drawing him closer. Suddenly, the walls began to tremble. A low rumble reverberated beneath their feet. Tund stopped, his breath quickening. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His grandfather's face was pale. "The temple is waking up." The rumbling grew louder, and from behind them, a deep, guttural growl echoed through the passage. Tund turned to see the shadows shifting unnaturally, forming into the shape of a massive creature, a beast made of darkness itself, with eyes like burning embers. "We must move faster," his grandfather urged. The creature advanced, its body slithering along the floor as if it was part of the darkness itself. Tund's heart pounded in his chest as they ran, their footsteps echoing through the narrow passageway. But no matter how fast they moved, the darkness was gaining on them. Just as they reached a large stone door at the end of the passage, the ground beneath them gave way. Tund's world spun as he fell into the darkness below. As the ground beneath Tund and his grandfather gives way, Tund falls into the darkness. Will he make it out? Join us on the next episode to find out.